to see you. I
I
wanted to
know.
ask you, were you the one that was telling me that you can lose your voice when you get stressed out, like from anxiety? Like you can actually lose your voice
It
even
wasn't
if
me,
you
but
know.
yeah, you can. I don't think it was me. But yeah, you can totally do
Okay.
that. Why do you feel stressed? Are you nervous meeting me? Is
No,
that
because
it?
like one of the small group leaders I talked to lost her voice, and she wasn't sick, or she didn't go to a concert, she
Mm.
wasn't screaming or anything like that,
Mhm.
but she said that sometimes when she gets stressed or anxiety, that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I don't
So
know I don't know that much about it, but I could like put them in touch with somebody who does that kind of thing. Yeah, it could be like could be one of those stealth infections that just shows up when you're stressed, like when you get the sores and stuff like that.
yeah.
Or yeah, it could be just emotional too. But yeah, happens all the time. That's why like we get this affective block too. Like you're like, wait, I speak very well this language. Can't sentence right now. And like it's just because you're nervous, meeting somebody or your boss. Like
That happens to me so many times, like when I go on podcasts.
that's really funny hearing from you. That's very like encouraging. So yeah, 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 yeah. Or you're like, I feel like I had too much coffee, but I haven't had any coffee, so it must be that. Yeah, must be that. Can't language right now. Yes, awesome. So today I wanted to talk to Sun about his experience with language and identity and authenticity and voice and all of those things because you're very well known, and yet you still I think struggle with some of the same things that we do either in our first language or in our second language. So first of all, can you tell people, who you are maybe and what you do, and we can talk a little bit about how we know each other as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, first of all, Bianca.
Oh, thank you for coming.
Uh, I've known you for a while. I guess you found me through Hadar.
I know that you did this podcast, not this podcast, but you did a podcast episode with Hadar a couple of years ago, and that's actually
Oh
how
yeah.
I heard about you. Originally, I was house sitting about 2 years ago in this place called Puerto Vallarta. Have you heard of it? It's a
Yeah.
beach town. Yeah, so
Yeah.
beautiful house overlooking the ocean.
That's where all the yachts are.
Oh, like yeah, tons of yachts. Yeah, I lived on my friend's house was on top of the hill, just gorgeous, and but it was really hot in the summertime. So I just remember I was going down to town to do something or go to a coffee shop, and I remember I was listening to podcasts. I like to listen to podcasts when I walk, and I was listening to Hadar's podcast because I know her from when she used to have a teachers group, right, for people who are teaching this kind of thing. And so I knew her, but she closed down the group. But before that, I was listening to her podcast and I heard you and I was like, oh, this sounds like the kind of person that I would like to know more about. Then I started following you on Facebook. And as soon as you opened up Night Owls, I think I signed up. So that's also
Thank
where I
you.
got to actually know you a little bit better. So maybe you want to talk about like, yeah, what you do.
Yeah, I love the way you told that story. You're a natural storyteller. And speaking of stories, that's what I teach, storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
That's what our community is all about, Night Owl Nation. And yeah, and I guess with Hadar, the thing that we talked about a lot, which also I guess a lot of our members, native English speakers,
Mm-hmm.
deal with, is like just that confidence, you know, confidence of like showing up or speaking up and speaking their truth,
Mm-hmm.
just being themselves,
Mm-hmm.
whether like in person or on camera or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of like the main topic that we talked about there. But yeah, what I do is I teach storytelling in a nutshell.
Everybody needs to be better storytellers, basically, right? Like you see a good movie, you see a good animated short that tells a great story in like 5 minutes or less, and I think we all have this yearning to do that better, right? Like we all have life experiences. Most of us have a ton in there that even if we don't want to share it with a huge audience, maybe we want to tell the story back to ourselves better or figure out why this thing is important to me. So there's definitely a need for storytelling. What made you decide? I've been curious to ask you, what made you decide to start Night Owls, right? Because you were doing
Okay,
you were doing something and storytelling was a part of it, but when did you decide to make it a group thing? Or what made you do that?
it's a long story. So my original background is I have an agency in New York City, and we work with. I mean, we used to work with a lot of like big brands like American Red Cross, Spotify, Columbia University. But we about 6 years ago, our first personal brand client was Gabby Bernstein. I don't know if you know her. And then we just got a string of like personal brand clients. So we kind of specialize in personal branding. What I realize is the power of a personal brand. I think the future of branding is personal brands. Like people are gonna connect with you as a human, and then they're gonna buy from you and stuff like that. And like Kylie Jenner is like the perfect example, right? She became the youngest billionaire just by starting a cosmetic line,
Mhm.
even though she has no business experience or anything like that. It's just all from her personal brand, right?
Mhm.
So I wanted to kind of make content. And when I started putting out content on Instagram, everybody kept saying, "Oh, son, you're such a great storyteller. Can you teach me storytelling?" Up until that point, I've never ever thought of myself as a storyteller or
Mhm. Mhm.
um, anything like that. And then, like, Domestic guy reached out to me and wanted me to do a course on storytelling. So it's not that I call myself a storyteller, or it's that people ask me for it.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, I want to teach storytelling. But
Mm.
what happened was, when I first started, it wasn't like I had a plan to like, okay, this is what I'm gonna create. Like it started very casually. Like I was like recording videos of me making carousels, and
Yeah.
I was recording videos of just like behind the scenes of stuff, and people loved
Mm.
it. So I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm gonna charge I'm gonna charge $5 a month to
Mhm.
give them like behind the scene of what I do every day, and like
Uh-huh.
people signed up. I was kind
I
of a
think
little
that's
bit
when I
shocked.
joined too. I was like, "Oh yeah, I need more carousels," and I'm like,
Yeah,
"Wait, we're storytelling? Even better," because I had already taken your
yeah,
storytelling class.
yeah, exactly. So and then we had added in like Sunday Zoom sessions after that.
Mm. Mhm.
And then we're like, oh, let's actually have a platform where people can sign up and talk. And it just evolved over the last year
Mm.
to this community where we get together and we practice storytelling like every week.
It grew really quickly too. I feel like suddenly, I think I did the first Wednesday workshop, and then there was Wednesdays and Mondays and Sundays and replays and small groups and group leaders, and now like there's just this whole like
Yeah,
thing now that really exploded because people have this need, and you're filling this need that they didn't even know they had. Right? I feel like especially now that it is more focused on storytelling and people know that going into it, it's not just like when I joined, I was like, oh, I really like what he's doing. I need more help, and I don't like these $100 a month clubs where like you're just watching replays, and you're not doing anything with anybody, and it didn't serve the need. I don't have a problem paying $100 a month for something, but the point was like this is not scratching the itch that I think that exists out there. I do the same thing with my group that I have. I call it the Accent Feedback Club.
hmm,
You can find whatever you want online, right? You can find all the information you need. You don't need me. But I think people want the connection, and they want that personalization, and they want to know that there's other people like them in the same
yeah,
boat.
yeah. I was actually talking to somebody about that the other day, and let's say your native language is Korean versus Spanish, right? Like what you struggle with in learning English is actually going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like I think why I did this whole practicing thing, because what usually happens is you watch some online course on storytelling or online course on copywriting, and then you try to apply it,
Mm-hmm.
or even like Photoshop, right? And then you try to work on your own project, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
you get stuck, and you're like, I
Yeah,
have a question, like, how do I make this work for me, right?
completely.
But then there's nobody to ask.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You just
Yeah.
kind of like give up, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why I think it's so good to be in a community where you can actually ask another human being who's
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit further ahead of you,
Mm-hmm.
and then get
Mm-hmm.
that answer. Yeah.
Yeah, and that sometimes doesn't happen in language groups because people have this, I don't know, prejudice, I guess, about, oh, I don't want to be in a Spanish class with these people because they're below me and I'm not going to learn anything from them.
Mm,
Well, you get what you give and you get out what you put into it, right? If I did that, I would never grow, in a way. If you're only always looking for people better than you, and also, I think you get a lot out of contributing. Maybe I can't do the grammar structure, but I have this story to tell that people enjoy. You're still giving back to the group. And I think that is something that people forget, at
yeah.
least at the beginning.
And I also learn the most when I teach.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think I learned the most in Night Owl Nation. I think I learned more than anyone else. Like,
I have seen how you've gotten so much better at structuring things, at like
yeah,
being on point, and how things run more smoothly for you now. It seems to be easier for you, coming from a
yeah.
teaching background. See
Like,
that, I'm
here's a
like,
good
oh.
example.
Uh-huh.
You see how, like, one of the things I always say now is, like, you don't have a story unless there's an old you versus new you.
Right, right.
Like, that thing, I didn't realize that until I've saw so many people make mistakes. I'm like, why is this story
Mm.
bad? Why is this? And then the
Mhm.
one pattern I saw is like, oh, everybody's telling story where there's no transformation. There's
Right.
no old you versus new you. So through teaching is how I've learned these concepts.
You don't know something unless you can teach it, right? So you think you know because you've learned it at some point, but then you don't really know because you don't run into those challenges and you can't step back. And like what you just described, let's say a big data set, and you can look back and you can see those patterns emerging, whereas the people in it, right? They don't even know that that's necessary, right? And for you,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
might not even think about it. Even if you know it, you might not even think like, oh, I have to actually tell people this. It's to you, maybe it's really basic. And
yeah,
to them, they don't even know what they don't know,
yeah,
So it's a
yeah,
whole different starting point. And another thing that
exactly.
I like about group learning and collective classes is the people that you meet that you would never come across, because you were talking about asking somebody, right? Having somebody to ask. And earlier we were talking about the recording software that I use. And the reason that I like it is because they have open office hours every Friday, right? They're always doing lives on YouTube, and like and you think, oh, that guy's so good, he's never going to talk to me. No, no, they message you back instantly. And I feel so stupid because I'm not good at it, and they're really patient, and you might not think that these people who know so much more than you are actually really down to earth. And so to me, that's been great. And the other thing, since we're on the subject, is that Felipe from our group
Yeah,
from Night Owls.
the magician.
Yeah, the magician Felipe that does the Zoom presentations. He and I recorded a podcast, and he actually helped me with the editing software as well. That's how I first, started talking to him. He kind of walked me through the beginning of that. But that's another thing where, like, if you don't have the community of people to help you with things that are just complex or difficult, doesn't have to be technical, then having that resource, it makes you feel cared for, and it makes you feel like you matter, and that you're not stupid, like, and that people are there to help.
Yeah,
So
they're really
I think that's what I
accessible.
like.
Like, one thing I noticed about our community is that um, most communities that I join in marketing world, they're there to sell usually. Like,
Mm.
so they make themselves look like they're much better than they really are, right? But then one thing I noticed about our community is everybody in our community is way better than they make themselves look. You understand what I mean? So when I
Mm.
reach out to people, what happens is, like, I'll talk to them and, oh, you're actually really good at this. Like, I'm always like shocked. And when they teach Wednesday workshop and things like that too, like, I'm always shocked. They're like, wow, like we have some
Mm.
really talented people in our community.
The quality
Hey,
of what
Felipe.
they do is really amazing, and also I feel like the quality of the people that you attract, right? It's almost like you deserve the people around you, right? And so, like, when you're there,
I like
you
that.
you feel yeah, you feel like, oh, this is where I need to be, because these people are more like me, in some
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
And I'm like,
everyone at
not really.
Night Owl is like no BS, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
They'll just tell you what you need to hear.
Yeah,
And yeah, but in a kind way, I think too. And that's why I like the small groups that we have, is because we get a chance to do not one-on-one, right, but like 4-on-1, 5-on-1 application, which you don't have that in other groups often, right? You don't have that in a do-it-yourself kind of video course as well. You just don't have that. And also, people are learning how to get better at giving feedback, I've found, right? Like, a lot of people, they have something to say, but they don't know how to say it, and they don't know what it's related to. So I've seen people get better also at, like, helping other people, if you know what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the skills that are like very overlooked,
Mm-hmm.
that are underrated, is asking good questions.
Oh my
Like,
God, yes.
a lot of people are so bad at asking questions.
Yeah. There's this book. I don't have it here. I have it like digitally. It's called Ask One Question, or Just One Question, or Just Ask One Question. Have you read that one?
No.
Oh my God, it's amazing. It's like how to kind of brainstorm questions and review which questions are actually better questions than others, and kind of put them in a hierarchy and stuff like that, because I found that when I was teaching, like in schools, people don't know how to ask questions, and they just stick with who, what, when, where, why, and how, or they'll ask yes no questions, and that's about it,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really further the
Yeah, exactly.
conversation.
Yeah.
My original question was, I didn't really catch if there was a very specific kind of turning point for you to be like, I want to do this as a group. I want people, I want interaction. Like, this is what I want to start.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened was, so I don't know if you remember, but I disappeared for like a year from Instagram. And I stopped posting, and like what happened was, I come from a marketing background, so a lot of my clients, I help them sell courses. We do the whole funnel and like,
Mm.
the free
Mm-hmm.
webinar and nurture and all of that thing. And I was gonna actually launch my own high ticket course on how to grow Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was, as I was writing the sales page and things like that, this is gonna help you grow Instagram, blah, blah, blah. I was like, wait a minute, like this is kind of a lie, because I know for a fact that 80% of the people that sign up, they're not actually gonna do the things I tell them to do. They're not gonna actually post every day. They're not
Mm-hmm.
gonna do like, they're not
Mm-hmm.
gonna be vulnerable. They're not gonna do any of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then what happened was, I kind of went into this like crisis,
Mm.
this like crisis where I'm like, is my entire life a lie? Like, because was my entire career about manipulating people to buy things that they don't need, or
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to work? That's kind
Mm-hmm.
of, so this existential crisis is what made me like not post for like
Mm.
a year and kind of go into this hole where
Mm-hmm.
where I'm like, like I'm like a fraud, right?
Oh no, yeah.
And then
Mm-hmm.
both my mom and my sister are professors, so I started talking to them, and they kind of like taught me about how to teach and things like that.
Ah.
So one of the things that I realized is that the practice is what's missing. It's not really the
Mm.
information,
Mm-hmm.
but the act of practicing
Mm-hmm.
is what's missing, is why most people don't see success. So that's why I wanted to create a community where people can practice together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's kind of how like I was like, okay, then I need to do more of a ongoing membership thing rather than just like a one-time course.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it got started, and then
Mm.
over time, like I
Tweaked
I've just
it,
like
yeah,
tweaked
figured
it,
out
yeah,
what you needed, what we needed, things like that. Yeah, I feel like
yeah,
now it's pretty rock solid. And of course things might change, but I knew there was
yeah,
something missing. I was like, like that's a huge jump, and nobody really does that, right? Most people are like, "Oh yeah, I'll make this course and, I'll set my price point and they'll go through the videos and everything's going to be great, right? And I'm going to help so many people." Well, the attrition rate on those courses is like what, 10%? Like nobody
yeah.
finishes those. And yeah, so this is the actual way that people can commit to themselves, commit to a group. There's accountability there, right? There's a shared interest, and like there's actually something you're doing, that's making it better.
I think also the reason why I changed to storytelling, because
Mm-hmm.
first I was going to teach marketing, Instagram, all of that, like,
Mm.
but the reason why I changed to storytelling is because what I realized is that the reason why they can't grow Instagram is not like because they don't know the hashtag or they don't know that they should have a funnel, and like that's not why. Like it's that they don't know how to actually tell good stories, or they don't know how to make good content.
Mm. That's
So
the
that's why I
skill.
actually need to teach the core of storytelling first.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started teaching storytelling, I'm like, holy shit, like everyone sucks in storytelling. But yeah, I don't. And then that's when I started breaking down storytelling, and I just like double down on storytelling. Yeah,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's also like a life skill, I feel like. Long before I started doing what I do now, I've had a lot of experiences in life, and I always found that I just sucked at conveying them. I've have all these stories, and I'd mess up the punchline, and I would like explain the joke, and I'd get things all mixed up, and I'm like, no, 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 like it's a good story. It's really like, you just believe me. So couple that with now it's helping me to help other people, I think, is to relay my story, help to relay other people's stories, so we can see that we're all kind of like in this together. So I think for me, it's been really, really helpful. Like language is just a big part of being human. And I think you were talking about like different mistakes and how you think in different languages and how you identify yourself as well, how everybody has like a certain voice or multiple voices. Like this is my
Mhm.
professional voice, and this is my at home voice, and this is my cuddling voice, and we've got all these different things mixed up in us. So maybe you could talk like briefly about how you feel maybe our personality fits with language and culture and some of those things and storytelling. Like if you were to think of a
Wow.
Venn diagram of those, well, how do they fit together for you?
Oh, I haven't really thought of that. But what I do know is that, okay, maybe I'll just riff and see what I did notice is that in Korea, you know that like the different voice you use in an office versus your friends or something like
Mm.
that
Hmm.
is such like a huge difference. Like they literally sound like two different persons.
Even grammatically, right? You have different grammars based on the respect that you show different
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
Is that
yeah.
correct?
Even
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That
Mm-hmm.
too.
Mm-hmm. Well,
That
voice.
definitely amplifies it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But one thing I realized is that stories are like cross cultural. Like I can tell a story that's very specific to me,
Mm-hmm.
and it really touches people that are like all different cultures, all different religion, all different
Mm-hmm.
language. It's so weird. And I guess one thing that I noticed is I think I tend to attract a lot of uh, like international like non-English native speakers because a lot of the courses that I've seen on storytelling and things like that, they talk very like academia, and they use like
Mm.
more like I try to use very very simple words,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I try to talk like very like I everything I do I try to um, make it like I'm a like at the level of like 12-year-old.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but we were just talking about this. I think it was God, it was this morning actually in my small group because I'm in two small groups. So the Spanish one and then the English one. But
Oh
I
yeah,
think it was the English one today. Um, oh God, what was I gonna say? Man, I just forgot about. Oh, this idea of like this universal thing between people, the storytelling that kind of binds us all together, right? Since the cave days, it's I said this today, and correct me if I'm wrong. This is what I was thinking at the time. This is what I said. So I don't know if this is good or bad, but there was like it wasn't relatable. No, it was the Spanish group. It wasn't relatable, and or it was, but we didn't know why. We couldn't figure out why is this like touching or not touching us, and I thought about it for a second. I was like, well, what's the feeling here? Like, what's the underlying feeling? What's the emotion? Was it sadness? Was it bravery? Was it shame? What was it here? And to me, I thought like, oh, I think that's the heart of it. Is from what you're saying is like, it doesn't matter the culture, it doesn't matter the background. We all have these same feelings, even if we classify them differently. But we all have these same feelings, and that's why we can use this as a connection. Do you see what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always surprised like whenever I'm traveling or something like that. Like I'm always so surprised how similar we are. That, like we think we're so different, but I'm always surprised that like, oh, I guess at the end of the day, humans are humans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people are like, how can you live in Mexico? It's so exotic. It's so strange. I'm like, people do laundry. We have Walmart. It's
Like
like,
everyone has imposter syndrome.
yeah.
Like doesn't matter where you go, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, everyone has like anxiety. Everyone has childhood trauma. Everyone has those things. Like so, I think those things like really are cross cultural.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and I guess back to the whole like cross cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I try to dumb everything down. I try to make everything as simple as possible
Mm-hmm.
because I think the reason why people think that there's no cross culture is because they're speaking like a college professor here. So of course, like a non-native English speaker is going to hear that, and they're not really going to be able to connect. But when you actually break down like that complexity into simple words, like everyone would get it actually. So
Magic, magic. Yeah, I feel like, and I love vocabulary, right? I love using it. I love knowing the difference in the subtleties between words. Love it. Use it when I get a chance. Actually, one of your new members, her name is Della. She does a thing about reading and speaking in English, and she's in my group too because she wants to weave in like pronunciation and speaking and reading because the writing, the spelling in English is atrocious. So it's really difficult for people to read out loud. So we convinced her to join your group. Actually, I think it was Tabby and I. And so she's in the group now as well. And we were talking yesterday. I had my teachers meeting yesterday, and we were talking about how we both have this problem of writing a story with these like $5 words in them. I'm pulling out all my Scrabble words because that's how I was taught to write in high school. You need this 5-paragraph essay, and you've got to use words like henceforth and therefore, otherwise it's not good writing. And we both suffer from that. And now we decided that, like, if a fourth grader can't read it, it shouldn't be in your story. That's what we decided yesterday.
Yeah. I think there's like a different time and place for different things. I agree with you. Like, for example, like if you look at the difference between the word envy and jealousy, right? Like they they can be they can replace each other, but not really. Like if you really, really want to be specific. So when I'm having a nuanced discussion in a podcast, or I'm having like a important discussion with somebody like deep, then obviously I'm going to try to be very specific as possible. But when I know that this is going out to on public and social media and things like that, like I have to be aware of that. And
Yeah. A, nobody's probably going to scrutinize you except for jerks, and B, the message is what's important. So it
yeah,
doesn't matter. And the simpler the better usually.
I think one mistake people make when they make content for social media is that they want 100% of the people that watch it to get it. But when you do that, like I think it's actually important that like you dummy it down, and 90% of people will get it. But like they want 100% people to get 100% of the content.
Yeah.
But I don't think of it like that. When I say something, I know that people are gonna get maybe 60% of it, and that's fine. So that's why I try to like keep it down to one lesson, one concept.
Oh yeah.
I noticed that a lot of people, when they watch movie, they don't understand the whole movie. Like a lot of times we'll go watch a movie and then afterwards we'll talk about it. It's like, oh, remember when that person did this, and blah, blah, blah. They're like, oh, that's what that was about. Like they still got the story, right? So like something like that. So I don't expect everybody to understand everything I say.
Yeah, exactly. Because where's the intrigue, right? like if I just told you everything you need to know, you probably think I'm boring now.
Yeah.
But also I feel like, to me, it's that you wanna say things that are for your people, and I don't want everyone to like understand everything, because that's not who I want to talk to.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I used to work when I first started teaching English. I was living in Jordan, and I was working for, well, first I worked for like Berlitz, and then I worked for the US Embassy, because they used to have schools. Every embassy had their own language school. And then they like sold them off, and there's only like a handful left in the world. And still in Jordan, in Amman, Jordan, there's still a school that's attached to the embassy, a language school. So I was working for the embassy, but I was teaching English. There were Brits there, Canadians, Americans, right, Jordanians who all worked there. And I will never forget, there was this woman who was also a teacher, and she thought she was insulting me, but it was the best compliment I've ever received. She said, "You know what, Bianca? You're not everyone's cup of tea." And this is coming from a British lady, so the tea thing really hit me. But I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm really not. And that's great. Thank you so much for telling me that. I often think of that. And that's what I think about our content too. It's like, it shouldn't be everybody's cup of tea. It should be something a little bit specific, a little bit different. Like you said, maybe not incomplete, but like ...
Yeah,
cliffhanger.
it's a huge mistake to try to please everyone, because that's one. If you look at ChatGPT, right? If you ask ChatGPT something, they're gonna give you kind of a very data stats driven answer that pleases everyone. Like, so if you go to ask ChatGPT and you say, is China bad for US? Like they're not gonna be like yes or no, right? But they're gonna be like, oh, in this case, blah blah blah, but within context, blah, blah, and then they're gonna give you all this long, nuanced answer.
Yeah. And in
And
the end, it's very
oh,
diplomatic sometimes, and it's like, well,
yeah,
and there's really no way to tell.
yeah, and then that's the thing that nobody wants to hear,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think what makes content good, that it comes from a human versus ChatGPT, is that humans have an opinion, and usually the opinion is based on their moral compass, right? So if you don't have an opinion,
Yeah.
and if you have an opinion, well, most likely what's going to happen is you're going to piss some people off who disagree with your opinion. So
Yeah.
if you're trying to please everyone, pretty much going to end up with a very boring content.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. You try to please everyone and you're not going to please anybody, especially yourself. And I think
Yeah.
also the opposite can be true. Like we get really into our own groups and sometimes we get really isolated and so you only get that one news outlet, and you only read the same thing and you get really like closed up. And so, you think you're the hero of your own little bubble, but actually we don't interact with other people who have different views than us. And so it just ends up like polarizing everybody a little bit more. Other
When I
side can be
usually see
dangerous.
that when people are in echo chambers,
Mm,
usually they don't like, yes, they're very strong, opinionated,
mm,
but when I see those people, usually it's not their own opinion. It's just the
mm,
opinion of that circle that they're like they're just regurgitating the opinion of that circle.
mm.
And it's not really coming from them. Because a lot of
Uh-huh.
times when people have those kind of opinions and I start having a conversation with them about their background and things like that, I find out that actually they're not like that at all.
Mm,
Like
mhm,
their
mhm.
real opinion is actually very different than the thing that they're saying or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and often, just like I think we were talking earlier about, being around like-minded people, I think the same can be true of language, right? And accents. Like, so you pick up the accents of the people you're around, who you spend the most time with, who you choose to spend the most time with. Also, your ideas end up kind of reflecting that too. I think a lot of people get caught up in their own group and they stop kind of thinking for themselves sometimes, or they've stopped expressing their own ideas even if they're in there until they feel maybe they don't feel safe in that environment to express those contrary ideas. And once they get out of that, then it's easier to express those. And I wanted to actually bring that idea up in terms of storytelling and the idea of feeling safe and expressing vulnerability and those kinds of things. So how do you see storytelling in relationship to feeling vulnerable, to feeling brave, any of those feelings?
I guess you know one of the things I used to talk about a lot actually is authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times what happens is people try to be safe and they try to say the thing that's the most safe things,
Mm.
but that just goes in one ear and the other. What happens is when you say something that's authentic, like for example, let's say your boss makes let's say we're in a meeting and boss makes a joke, right? And everybody's like, ha, 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 they're fake laughing. They know it's not funny,
Mm-hmm.
but they're just kind of fake laughing. And then all of a sudden I go, cool story, bro. Like I let's say I mock him
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for telling a stupid joke, right?
Yes.
What's gonna happen is the rest of the group who kind of like went with the crowd and fake laughed politely is gonna be like, oh shit, I wish I
Mm.
can be so free that I can speak my opinion. Like
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had the courage to do that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what inspires people, right?
Mm.
It's kind of like the example I give, like in Hunger Games when Katniss Everdeen volunteers. What that did was because everybody felt that way, like, but nobody
Yeah.
had the courage to actually do it until
Mm-hmm.
she did, and that's what got everybody else inspired. Be like, "Oh, I want to have that kind of courage," and
Mm-hmm.
that's what really authenticity does, I think. So I I I don't know, like, but it's easier said than done, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's say
Yeah.
you're in a group of 100 people and 99 of them think this way,
Mm-hmm.
and you're the one who has to like, you know.
Do it.
So yeah,
Yeah. I think on another side of that is that like I'm always the first one to volunteer. Not I don't think because I'm brave, but I'm terrified of the awkwardness of sitting there waiting for someone to raise their hand. And I'm like, fuck it, let's get this over with. Like, no one is going to remember the first person. You'll remember the second person or the best person, but you never remember the first person. And I can't stand that awkward silence of nobody volunteering. So, yeah, I don't think I'm brave. I think I'm just maybe more afraid of the
no, you are
silence.
brave because I mean, that's the thing about bravery and courage is that if it's easy, that means you're not courage. Like the reason why it's called courage is because it's hard, it's scary, and
But
then
you
you
do it
just have to
anyways.
do it. Right?
Hmm.
So, but it's I would actually say people remember the first person,
Mm.
and usually the first. I always say this: the first follower is the real leader. Because I don't know if you watched that TED talk where when you are doing something brand new,
Mhm.
like they call this person is a lone nut, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
and the example that they give is like, there's a guy who's just like dancing like crazy by himself in the grass,
Mhm.
and everybody's just watching him, and until another person comes and joins him next, and then once that happens, like another person came, and because until that first person comes, you're just some crazy guy. But then once that second person comes,
Mhm.
now you're a group, and then like once, and then that gets other people to join, and at a certain point, like it becomes a crowd, and that's
Mhm.
how you start a movement. So that
Mhm.
without that first follower, you'll never be able to start a movement. So,
Mhm.
and that's kind of like the person that shares first, that raises their hand first, is that first.
Ah, well, now I'm gonna be more self-conscious and never volunteer for anything. No, I'm just kidding. So,
No.
yes. Somebody today sent me an email. I send out a newsletter every week on Thursday. So she got the newsletter yesterday. She sent me an email, and I have this group I was telling you. So it's a feedback club. We're in a group, and everybody is literally there to make mistakes, right? So, for example, they'll say, I went to bed instead of I went to bed, right? And so, and their job is to make mistakes. So either other people can catch it and be like, oh, I sound like that, or and hear it in themselves, or if nobody catches it, then I'm there, to catch them. So that's the whole point. And this woman sent me a message today saying like, "Oh, I would love to join your group, but I'm just terrified. Like I'm so terrified to make mistakes in front of other people." And I was having a hard time like saying what to respond. I don't want to necessarily encourage her, but I wanted to validate how she felt. And I was like, "You're right. It's fucking difficult. It's really difficult to know that that's going to happen and walk into that burning house anyways, and do it anyways." So that's all I could write back. Like I don't want to tell you what to do, but you're really right. Like that what you say is so true. And I told her, as you well know, I joined this Spanish speaking small group specifically to work on my Spanish because it's like intermediate, and I was terrified. And then you said you wanted to watch the videos, and I was like, yeah, let's see about that.
Now you know how your students feel like, because you're
Absolutely, and I've felt like that before, and because I've in other languages, I've been there, but this was almost the exact same idea of having a group and me knowing that I'm gonna make mistakes, right?
psychologically, what a lot of like um bilingual people know that,
Mm.
like, is, when I first came to US and I didn't speak English, I was always, consider myself like an English as second language.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're like that, you actually think that you're dumber than you really are,
Mm.
just because, like, you know what I mean, like that environment of everybody speaking fluently, and then I'm
Mm-hmm.
the only, like, that actually makes me feel like I'm dumber, even though I might not be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something to that makes you kind of shrink. And like, for most of my like life, all the way up even until like when I was 25, I actually thought I was stupid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because you don't, oh, wait, you already speak another language, right? Most Americans only speak one language and not even very well. And then, so you already speak another language. Okay, it's not perfect, but you're made to feel this shame for some reason by other people. And, you didn't come up with that. Somebody made you feel that way and it
Yeah,
persisted. And so a lot of people that I talk to, yeah, it's not about I want to sound like a native, which is ridiculous
yeah.
because we're all who we are and we all have different accents. But the idea that like you have this horrible feeling inside of you. You don't feel like respected. You might not feel heard. You might feel invisible, right? There's always something in there, and that's
Yeah,
really what it's about
yeah.
usually for most people.
And
Me
if that
too in
happens
Spanish.
every single day, like when
Yeah.
you're in a new country,
Yeah.
you're literally going through that 24/7 every single
Mhm.
day, right? When you're like,
Mhm.
everywhere you go, people are like talking to you like you're a baby,
Oh god.
like
Yeah. Oh
like
god.
people talk slowly to you, and
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's just over time,
Or
that,
loudly. I'm just gonna
yeah,
turn up the volume because
exactly.
that's what you need. Yeah.
Like I'm gonna understand it better now.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Speak slowly, but really loudly. That's helpful. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so that's what happens, like that. I think that's what happened to me, and that's why I can understand why when I see like English as like non-native speakers like trying to make content or something like that,
Mhm. Mhm.
like I know where they're coming from,
Yeah,
so
yeah, absolutely.
it's
That's a
extra
whole
harder for
extra
them.
layer. Yeah, yeah. It's already a struggle with imposter syndrome that many of us have with like maybe there's real difficulty with the language, you know, right? And that's a problem, but maybe you just think it is or maybe you're worried about people's perceptions because it is true. There's just shit tons of like language bias and prejudice and you know all these things that go with it. It's I'm not trying to say it's not there. It's really there, but it adds this really thick layer for people that have, you know, an extra layer that they have to kind of surmount to
Yeah,
do the same things, and that sucks.
yeah.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
that's life, right? Like it's because I understand too, because like, if I'm talking to a non-native speaker, I'm gonna speak slowly for them
Mm.
also, not
Mhm.
because I'm trying to patronize them,
Yeah.
but because I want them to understand, like, right?
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
actually doing it for them, like,
Yeah.
but then to that person, it is gonna feel patronizing, and like, so there's nothing you can do about it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's yeah, you think you're helping and maybe you really are, but there's like something else behind that. I'll
I
just
also
ask you.
like before when you were talking about different cultures, what I realized is that different cultures have different level of like status and how much you care about your status and how you look. So for example, Koreans care a lot about how they look and how,
Mm.
like they don't, they care a
Mhm.
lot about that. So but then like when I meet Chinese people are less, they care a little bit less about
Mhm.
how people perceive them, right?
Mm. Mhm.
So what I noticed when I was young, like Chinese kids were improving English way faster than Korean kids,
Mm.
just for speaking. Not when
Okay.
it comes to writing or reading,
Mhm.
but when it comes to speaking, like
Mhm.
Chinese kids were becoming much more fluent, much faster,
Mhm.
because they weren't shy or embarrassed about just saying it the wrong way, and
Mm.
they kept doing it. Whereas in Koreans, they don't want to look stupid, so they
Mm.
always keep their mouth shut, like they never say anything.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I noticed that like at a young age, and
Mm. Because you noticed that when you were in school in the U.S.
yeah, in the U.S.
and
when
that's where
when
that
I
was
was in
happening.
ESL, I was like,
Class.
why
Yeah.
do Chinese kids like in 3 years they become fluent, and like this Korean kid's been here for 3 years and he still sucks in English.
And did you
And
notice that then that was maybe the underlying reason? Did you notice like, oh, it's because they're
yeah,
not afraid to make mistakes? As a
yeah.
child, did you recognize that, or was it later?
No, I knew it then because I saw that then, like in high school,
Mhm.
and then I also saw how, because my dad is like that, like where he cares a lot about like
Mm.
how people perceive him, so he would never ever say anything. Like
Mhm.
if we have to call something, he'll always tell me to like talk to
Mm.
them.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
then my mom wasn't like that. My
Mm.
mom like doesn't care. She'll just say it wrong, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
And now like my mom speaks like pretty much fluent English, and my
Yeah.
dad doesn't speak at all. So like I
Ah.
kind of saw that at
Mhm.
home too. So that's why I
Mhm.
knew that,
How it was happening.
like
Yeah.
that ego and how we that the mask we wear, right?
Mhm.
How much we care about how people think of us, those kind of things,
Mhm.
how it affects language, like
Yeah. How we feel about it, how what we can express. The mask that we wear out of self-preservation probably can really get in the way. Like it's important, it's helpful. Thank you very much, mask, for being there when I needed you. But sometimes you have to like throw it out the window as well,
yeah,
you know. And
especially
yeah.
when you're learning something,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
like a
Yeah, that
language.
humbleness. Yeah, to
Yeah,
be a beginner, right?
yeah,
Yeah, you have to like just accept it, and the ego, like you said, the ego really gets in the way. Definitely,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, speaking of which, I wanted to ask you, thinking about language and culture too. What about emotions and intonation? Because if we're all about storytelling and vulnerability and authenticity and these kinds of things, like that's tough. That's rough, and it's rougher for some people than others, depending on how you were raised, right? Sometimes gender roles play a part. Sometimes it's culture too. So I was thinking about because, as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Korean is a tonal language. So you have tone, you have a change in pitch, but that means like the difference in vocabulary, right? Or maybe grammar, right? It's related to the language, not how I feel about what I'm saying, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, do you feel like intonation and how you show emotion when you speak in Korean, let's say, is different than in English? Like
Yeah,
how you
yeah.
show that.
I sound like a totally different person when I speak Korean.
How do you sound?
Yeah, yeah. Like I sound completely different in two different languages.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
also how that applies, I think, in speaking is like I've been watching this like voice coach like videos, like he talks about how you should speak and like
Mm.
intonation and all of
Mhm.
that stuff like that. And I realized that usually when I talk, I'm very monotonous and
Mm.
kind of like how I'm talking right now. This is how I
Mhm.
normally talk. But
Mhm.
then when I get really emotional and things like that, I start going like, like, and then I noticed it in my videos.
Yeah.
Like, I can clearly see the difference between
Yeah.
when I was just trying to deliver information
Yeah.
versus when I was like emotional.
Mhm. Mhm. And which was the better video?
The one that's emotional
Mm.
always does well.
Mhm.
And the ones where
Exactly.
are like just information, even
Yeah.
though it's better content, better information, it doesn't perform. Like,
Mhm.
I really, really, really think that most people care way much more about how you say things than what
Yeah.
you say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah,
100%. And this is like what I've been focusing on a lot more lately is intonation and how to connect with people more with your voice and your patterns, you know. Like you said earlier, you said something like the thing they think it was the thing about sitting at the meeting with the boss. And the way you said it was like bang on. When you said, "Oh, I'm mocking," I already knew that you were mocking with what you said because of your intonation pattern, right? And sarcasm is so difficult in English, and it has to be subtle, otherwise, it's not good. And
yeah,
jokes, you have to deliver the jokes just right, just right. I work with a lot of actors and things like that, and I have this one guy. He's from Japan, and he told me recently. He said, "Bianca, I have made a decision. I want to do stand up." And I was like, wow, that's huge. Like, I can't even imagine the courage it must take to go from Japanese to English and to go do stand up and like to try to be funny and connect with your audience on all those different levels with like, yeah, you have your body, you know, it's not a podcast, but you also like you have to do it with your voice, you know. It's really really tough. So I'm like, wow, great job. It's going to be such a challenge for him, and I'm really excited. So when you were saying you're two different people, you feel comfortable in both, right? That's how you feel. You feel more
yeah.
expressive, maybe in English, versus in Korean you feel kind of flat. Do you think that has anything to do with this idea, these power structures that exist? Like you should sound like a white businessman.
Yeah,
Sound.
even in Korea,
Mm-hmm.
like when I talk to somebody older, I would sound different than somebody when I'm talking to a friend, right?
Mm.
Because I would be more expressive with my friend.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I'm talking to somebody like older or like,
Or like a
in
niece
school or
or a
something like,
nephew.
yeah,
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 like
exactly.
little kids. It like universally, no matter what your language is, you tend to vary your pitch more when you're talking to children. And so
Yeah,
it must be like a reverse kind of
yeah,
hierarchy where the higher the status, the more like monotone we go,
yeah.
you know. We
And
must
it's
have
so
learned that.
weird because here in the US, I don't do that anymore. I think I've gotten to a point
Mm.
where you can be the CEO of the biggest company in the world or the president of the United States, or you can be my doorman or an intern. I
Mhm.
would talk exactly the same way to all of you, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like that's I've learned to do that.
Mm.
It took years of training to get to that mindset.
Mhm.
And then I go to Korea, and then boom, it changes. Boom, all of a sudden I'm acting like a different person in front of an older person,
Yeah.
just because I was taught to always be more respectful of an older
Mhm.
person,
Mhm.
even if that person is an idiot.
Yeah. Yes. Even if you don't agree with it, you do it anyways because that's what's
Yeah.
expected.
So culturally, I think in Korea we're just ingrained to be like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that as soon as somebody speaks, some older person starts speaking to me in Korean, my mind automatically goes to that mode of like, okay,
Mhm.
yes, sir.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's code switching, what we do, like, not just like your body is now in Korea, the country, right? Geographically, I have to speak like this, but throughout the day, depending on who you're speaking to, you
Yeah,
have to switch
yeah,
all of these things because you got to go in and out of those codes. And for
yeah,
me, that's really impressive because even like in Spanish or in French, you know, it's already too much for me to deal with like the formal you and the informal you, or to have like gendered nouns like the table is feminine but the car is masculine and the bridge is whatever, the bridge is neutral or whatever. Like it's already a lot for me to think about
why
those
is the
things.
bridge neutral?
No, I don't mean the bridge. Yeah.
Uh,
Actually, there's an interesting story about bridges. I'm just going to ask you, Think of some adjectives. Think of 5 adjectives to describe. Hold on. I want you to think in Korean. Think of the word in Korean and think of words in Korean. And you don't have to tell me what they are, but just think of those words that describe a bridge, the adjectives you would use. Think of 5 of them.
Okay.
Okay, now don't tell me what they are yet. I'm going to ask you if they're the same. They may or may not be. So in English, now think of the word bridge in English, burn it in your brain in English, and now think of 5 words in English, adjectives that describe a bridge. And they may or may not be the same.
I think they're the same for me. And the reason why I think is because as soon as you said bridge, like I visually picture a bridge.
What kind?
Like, well, because you started with Korea, so I
Okay.
immediately thought of a bridge that's in the Han River, like in Seoul, right? And then when you said it, think of it in English, I pictured that it went back there.
Interesting. Like if I had said, picture the Brooklyn Bridge or picture Golden Gate Bridge, like, do you think there would be a different outcome?
Um, no, but
No?
I wonder why my mind went there, right? Because like there's also small bridges too. Like I was thinking of this huge bridge, but there's small bridges too. And if I was thinking of a small bridge, I would probably come up with different words. And in English, the word bridge also can be a verb, right?
True. Yeah, yeah.
Like in Korea, it's not.
I didn't know that. So it's
So
only going to be like a noun, a thing.
yeah. So
Uh-huh.
if I was thinking of that, or like for example, like in a violin,
Yeah.
there's also a bridge in violin. So there's like multiple meanings to that word bridge,
Yeah, in
like
English,
in
that's
English, but in
true.
Korea,
Yeah.
actually, the Korean word for bridge,
Yeah.
it's tari, also
Uh-huh.
means legs.
Oh.
So maybe
Uh-huh.
if I was actually talking in Korean, maybe my
Right.
mind would have went somewhere
It
else. I
would
don't know.
be. Yeah. So the reason I'm asking is because they did this famous study across many languages where they said, okay, describe a bridge, right? In German, in French, in Spanish, in Icelandic, right? In all these different languages, they said, think of a bridge. Now write down words to describe the bridge. And they found that if in your language you have gendered nouns, right? And if for you a bridge is feminine, then you would say words like it's elegant, it's beautiful, right? It's all these words that we associate with femininity, I guess. And if you in your language a bridge is masculine, then you'd say words like strong and upright and powerful and things like that.
What is it in English?
Oh, in English we
Is
don't
it
have gendered nouns. That's the thing. It's not a he, it's not a she, it's an it, right? So that's I think that's why it came out when I said, "Oh, and a bridge is neutral," because I think I was thinking of how in English we don't think of it can be strong and it can be elegant, right, at the
Yeah,
same time.
there's no gender nouns in Korea either. It's exactly like here.
Interesting.
So when
Ah.
you said bridge, like the adjectives that I thought of was like long, tall,
Mhm.
grand,
Mhm.
like
Mhm. Mhm. Interesting.
has nothing to do with gender, right? Like
That to me is even more interesting because if you spoke another language where it was feminine for you,
yeah,
then in English and whatever that language is, they might be different adjectives, right? But then you
yeah,
really suddenly said like, oh yeah, they're probably the same, and maybe it depends on the
yeah.
meaning. So I thought that was really
Yeah.
interesting.
I guess
That connection.
in English you like because you know how they always call boats or cars like they refer to them as her or
Mm-hmm.
so I guess there's a little bit of gender nouns there.
I think yeah, I'm gonna push back a little bit. I think that's more about how men like to possess women generally, and they like to,
Oh, really?
yeah. I think it's more related to that. If I were to take like the feminist view, like this. So yeah, think about nicknames for women. Usually it's about food, right, or something really small and diminutive, right, things like that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think those things have a history that's not related to grammar. That's my opinion, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was surprised like when I was watching Forrest Gump and they named their boat Jenny and then
Mm,
somebody told me that yeah, like all boats are named female.
mm,
I was like, why? Because like when I think of a boat, I think of actually more of a male. Like I
mm-hmm.
don't like or a car, right? Like usually most people call their car by
Uh-huh.
female name, but like
Right.
when I think of a car, I would give it a male name, but so
Masculine, yeah,
I
because
didn't really understand
mid-engine
that.
and yeah, maybe
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, and then my feminist goes, "Well, that's because men like to own them." And, like, probably the man owns the boat or the man owns the car, you know? But that's just my feminism, like, popping up there.
I don't
Yeah.
think Korea is like that. Like a lot of people think that Korea is very male dominated. So I guess it kind of is, but in Korea, I don't think men think of like women as like like in that like I own like your mind
Mm,
like that type
mhm.
of thing. You know, like in Korea, like women don't change their last name.
Mhm, mhm.
Like they keep their last
Yeah,
name.
yeah.
Like here, you know how like the wife takes the husband's last name. They don't do
Yeah.
that in Korea. Maybe that
Masculine.
means it's more male dominated actually, because
Hmm.
I think the reason why they don't is because they're basically saying, no, you're not part of our family. You're not part of our
Oh.
bloodline.
Oh, that's a definitely different way to look at it. I
Yeah,
assume they take the father's name, the children, yes?
yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
But for us, it doesn't matter because my mom and my dad has the same last name. You know,
Mm.
there's only like handful of last names in Korea, so that's why everybody's either Kim or Lee, right?
It's just gonna concentrate
Or
anyway,
Park.
so
Yeah,
not a big deal.
yeah.
In the future, you can say that's why then. Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of names, in Korean, if I were to say your name, what would it sound like?
Like my Korean name,
Yeah. Mhm.
it's Lee Sun-woo. So
Mm.
in Korea, you say the last name first.
Right.
So my name is Lee. So you
Mhm.
know how I say my middle name is Woo?
Yeah.
I always make fun of it. I'm like, oh, I hate Woo. I even removed it from my. I call myself Sun Yi,
Uh-huh.
but my full name on the passport is Sun Woo Yi.
Ah.
But then
Mhm.
in Korea, Yi comes first, so it's Lee
Mhm.
Sun Woo. Yi.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
in English, I would say Yi Sun Woo, right?
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
I was saying in Korean, I would say Yi Sun Woo.
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
like you hear the difference, like
Yeah,
Yi
definitely.
Sun Woo versus
Mhm.
Yi Sun Woo. I
Comes
don't know.
off.
The pronunciation is a little bit different
Uh-huh.
when I say it in English versus Korean.
For sure, for sure. I've never studied Korean, forgive my ignorance, but also from what I know, Korean, the writing of Korean was basically created. The recent script is created to be
Yeah,
easy to read.
in terms of the written language,
Yeah, yeah.
I think
Hmm.
it's like the newest language to be invented or something like that.
And I think it was done on
That
purpose with the idea of we need to make this simple so that our country is more literate. And I
yeah,
love that.
that's
I
what
admire
happened.
that so
Like
much.
they realized that the only way the country can be strong is if everybody was illiterate.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
one of the emperors, like, there's a movie about it,
Oh, really? Oh,
and it's such an interesting movie because I was actually talking to. Do you know Marwa?
yeah. I know Ottawa from way back. Yeah, yeah.
So I was actually talking to about how they were doing it, and what they had to do was they started with the phonetics of what you know that language that they use for yoga.
Hmm.
I forget what it's called. But anyway, they started with that, and then they had to figure out every kind of sound you can make, right?
Mm.
So
Hmm.
like and every kind of movement in the tongue
Yeah.
and everything.
All the
So they
phonetics, all
broke
the
it all
phonemes.
down. Yeah,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and it was fascinating. The movie.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm asking myself, why is it that Korean is not like the world language, right? Because it's so simple for everybody to learn, and
Yeah.
English is so difficult.
In English, I feel like there's so many different ways to say the like a
Oh, yes.
pronounced like
Yeah.
or or
Uh-huh,
like
uh-huh.
you
Yeah.
actually have to know the word, otherwise you don't know how to say it, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
in Korea, you don't even have to know what it is. As if somebody writes it, you can
You
say
can read
it.
it. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
read it.
you can read it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's called transparency in a language. Arabic is pretty transparent too, but then, like, you can ask Marwa about this. So in Arabic, if you know what the sound is, right, you can say it even if you don't know what it is. If you're saying,
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah. That's how Korean is.
but here's the hard thing about Arabic is unless you're reading a children's book or if you're reading the Quran, the holy text, they don't write all the vowels. So then you have
Uh,
3 out of like 5 and almost half of them are missing. So then you have to guess. So it's this mix of like, "Oh, look how
got
easy
it.
this is." Just kidding. Like keep
I think
guessing.
that's what happened in the Korean language when they did it. They realized that okay, we're missing vowels, and then they figure out a different way. So it's probably because it's the most recent language. They
Mhm.
already saw all the mistakes of all the other languages. I
Nice.
think what they actually the thing that they started from is a Sanskrit. They started with
Mm.
Sanskrit and then
Mm-hmm.
they developed it from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you have to tell me what movie that is because that seems right up my alley. To me,
Yeah,
that's
I'll send it
super
to you. Yeah,
interesting.
I
Yeah.
I I have a feeling that you're gonna be fascinated
Yeah,
when you watch
definitely.
it.
Yeah. Definitely. I love all that stuff like that kind of thing, like typography in terms of like the evolution of typewriters and things like that. For
Mhm.
example, when you were saying just now about the letter A in English, actually O is the worst. Let's take O. Letter O in English is the worst. It can make like 10 different sounds that come
Yeah,
out, right? Think of the single. The opposite of man is what?
woman.
Okay, singular, woman, woman,
Mhm.
There's letter O and it's going And then what's the plural?
Woman. Women.
Women,
Yeah.
women. You're like, letter O, what are you doing? Yeah, so there's like 10 different things, right?
Like Oscar is like a
Almost as in
oh,
box, right? Exactly. Or hockey, for example, like
yeah.
it can be O as in go, for example. It's like the worst because there's like 10 different sounds that it can make.
I was so confused when I first came here.
I bet. You were saying Oscar and
Yeah.
and
That's
woman,
why I
maybe.
think, in Korea, when you learn a language, they start with the writing first.
Mm.
But I noticed that here, what they do is they start with the just saying the word apple first before they
Mm.
actually teach you how to write it.
Mm.
You start with the speaking first, and then you
Uh-huh.
go apple. Like in
Yeah.
Korea, they do the opposite. They teach you all the written ones first.
Ah. Uh-huh. Even at home, like with small children, do you teach children to write at home, or do you wait till they go to
Actually,
school and then
no.
they learn?
I guess at home you already learned those words.
Uh-huh.
So by the
Uh-huh.
time you go to school, that's why you're starting with it.
But even in school, when you have new words, you're writing them first because you
Yeah,
can already
yeah,
say
yeah,
if you can write them, you can say them. I imagine.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, we'll start like a campaign of
it's fascinating. So fascinating when you start digging into how like different cultures learn different things.
yeah, like we always had spelling tests, as kids because yeah, we had to know how to spell it. And now, if you talk to an adult, usually they don't know how they know it, but they just internalized it for so long, so they have a
That's
hard
true.
time teaching somebody else. Like, oh, it just is. That's just
I
the way it
just
is.
know it. Yeah, that's
It's
how.
terrible.
That's the way it is.
Yeah, it's terrible. Sometimes I can offer help. I'm like, look, 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 there's a pattern here. It's great. Look, there's a pattern. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. I'm really sorry.
I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what a teacher's job is like. I guess as a teacher, we have to understand like how to put ourselves in that position. Like,
Mm.
because a lot of times, like I do that too. I just dismiss things that,
Or
yeah,
you don't realize, like, oh, for them it's a big deal, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think it comes back to the idea of like validating and saying like, I'm sorry, it sucks. The only time letter O is gonna sound like as far as I know, is the word women. You're just gonna have to remember. I'm really sorry. It's
Well,
like
I didn't even
getting to it.
realize that until you just told me, actually. So
even though
that's
you, even though
fascinating.
you've been here for years, you've been there for
Yeah,
years, and like
yeah,
yeah, you've internalized it, right?
yeah,
You're like, yeah, I just know that I know. I don't know how I know, but I just
yeah.
know that I know. I think a lot of, for me anyways, is like, yeah, going back to being a beginner, right, and being like, how do they see this? Where are they coming from? Like if you're coming from Korean as an adult, never having studied English, you look at some of these words and you're like, are these people insane? Like, who decided to write this like this? Why is that okay? you
Oh my
know?
gosh. Well, like when I first came here, the movie, like the Pee Wee Herman was popular.
Oh, yeah.
And in school, like everybody used to say, "I know you are, but what am I?" And like everybody kept saying, "I know you are,
Yeah.
what am I?" And I thought that it was like I, and
Mhm.
then N-O,
Yeah,
and
of
then
course.
you are, right? So
Uh huh.
I thought they were saying that like
I
not me,
know.
you,
Yeah.
right? I thought that's what they were saying.
Uh huh. Uh huh. I know you are,
Yeah,
but what am
exactly.
I? Yeah, that must have been really difficult for
So
them.
that phrase confused me so much. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what?
How does that make sense? Yeah, but you also probably as a child, you thought you knew what it was, you accepted it,
Yeah, that's
and
just
then
what I
later you're
thought.
like,
Yeah,
wait a minute.
yeah, 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 yeah. As an adult, it's like, oh, that's what it was.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Yes. All the time it happens to me, I'll tell somebody some like, oh, no, it's not this, it's this. And they're like, are you serious? I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Like, and they just didn't know. How are you supposed to know?
Yeah.
But yeah, those moments of like, aha. I feel like those are the best moments when you really
Yeah.
help somebody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like also, I've been hearing the word like somatic therapy for a long time, right? Ever
Mm.
since I started getting into this like spiritual world, and then
Mhm.
but I didn't know what somatic means, right? I
Mhm.
thought it meant something like pain or something like that. And then like a few months ago, I looked up the word Semitic, and
Uh-huh.
I was like, oh, that that makes sense. I
Okay,
do
so
that so much. Like there's words that I don't know,
uh-huh.
but I just guess what it means.
Yeah, in context.
Uh,
Yeah, that's me in Spanish. That's most of my life in Spanish. I'm like,
Yeah,
I get enough. I get enough. I might not
yeah,
be able to get like the chocolate ice cream, but I can get the ice cream. Like I can get some ice
yeah,
cream, but then I can muddle my way through a lot of my life here. And like 80% is way more than I need, right? I'd be
yeah.
happy with 40% most of the time.
You can get
Um,
around with knowing very little.
yeah,
I
yeah,
realized.
exactly. I was having this conversation the other day with somebody about like, can you get by with 1,000 words in a language or 2,000, right? And like maybe it depends on the language, but also it depends on what the words are, right? If you have these high frequency words like go and want and need and good, you're doing all right,
Yeah, I
right?
think you can. I think you definitely can.
Mm-hmm.
1,000
Mm-hmm.
words.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But some people don't think that, well, they think that the words they need are those academic words, right? They think they need the word proliferate and they need the word
Yeah.
subjugation.
But
Don't
there's a
spend enough
difference
time.
between getting by and like being able to get a job in that language. Like for
Mm.
example, like now I'm the opposite. Like
Mm-hmm.
Korean, I suck in Korean.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you were to say, yeah, I can go live in Korea, but if you were to say, can I get a job working in a marketing agency in Korean,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I would probably suck, right? Like as a
Mm-hmm.
let's say, can you do sales
Mm-hmm.
in an agency in Korea? No, I
Mm-hmm.
can't
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I don't know the business language. I don't know, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
You're stuck in your like 8-year-old boy body or
Yeah,
your
yeah,
8-year-old
yeah.
mind.
Yeah. I talk like I literally talk like a 10-year-old, yeah.
Exactly. When I went to France and when I learned French, I was a teenager, and now even now when I speak French, I think I must sound like angsty, or something like
Mhm.
that because I don't have adult vocabulary. So at
Yeah.
least now in Spanish, I'm gonna sound like an adult someday.
When I talk like people are like, "Oh, so cute."
No, don't say that. That's very interesting because it reminds me of the thing we were talking about before about intonation and like how you're perceived, even if it's just in their minds. Like we're just constantly being judged, even if we
Yeah,
just think it, right? We feel like we're
yeah,
constantly
yeah,
being judged. But then somebody says it to you out loud, and you're like, okay, if one person says it, there's got to be like 15 more that didn't say that,
yeah. I mean, I'm used to like I guess I've had good training to like of always being underestimated.
Mm.
So I actually love being the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
love being underestimated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like right now, like when I like what happened is now I started Twitter, right? And
Mm.
I'm basically starting Twitter all from scratch, right?
Mm.
I'm trying to build up Twitter. Like Instagram, I feel like I've kind of built up my reputation to a certain point
Yeah.
that people don't look at me as an underdog anymore, right?
Mm.
Like they, like
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
way, like once you grow your kind of brand or your followers and your community,
Yeah.
like the way people talk to you, even strangers,
Mm-hmm.
the way they talk to you is totally different. That
Mm.
like if I had a if I had like 100 followers and I was nobody, like the way they would talk to me, even though I'm the exact same person, the
Right.
exact same content,
Uh-huh.
the way they talk to me is going to be totally different than if I had 1 million followers and I was the CEO of this company.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Then even though I have the exact same content,
Right,
they're going to
right.
talk to me totally different, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's underestimating mating me on Twitter. Everybody's kind of like ignoring me and things like that, and I love that. I love being underestimated because I love proving people wrong.
So how do you feel on Instagram then when you're on the top, let's say? You're on top on Instagram. People talk to you differently now. How does that make you feel?
I guess I don't know. I guess after a while you just get used to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was definitely like a shift in my life when I started making money, where people started treating me differently,
Mm.
and right away it was a little bit weird, right? Like, but then after a while, I guess maybe I got used to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm soft now. Like maybe, but I don't know. I think I'm generally like I try to I try to treat everybody and like look at everybody like the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, like no matter where I go or who I'm talking to,
Mm.
I try to. treat people the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm, for the most part, I think I'm pretty good at like keeping myself grounded and like not letting it get to my head and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I
Mm-hmm.
try not to yeah, I try not to think about that stuff too much.
Yeah,
Like when
yeah.
people underestimate me and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
instead of like trying to prove myself, like
Yeah, yeah.
um I try not to like let it get in my skin.
Mm-hmm. I think I like maybe being underestimated. If we're talking about language, right? Like in Spanish, for example, sometimes I start out by saying, sorry, my Spanish isn't so good. Like before anything, I'll just put that out there to kind of lower the expectations so they don't like get confused from the beginning. So I'll put that out there. And then some people will be like, oh no, your Spanish is great, you know? And of
Mhm.
course it makes me feel good. But if I, and then sometimes, here's the other problem. I'll say something like really well because it's the same thing I'll say every day, right? Good day, how are you? Blah blah blah. Like there's some stock phrases that I'm pretty good at now, but that's a problem because when I do it really well, then their response
Uh,
is like, brrr, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's it. That's the best I got. Sorry. So you have like that, you set the bar too high, then that's no good either. So sometimes I'll make mistakes on purpose, right? Even though I know. So to like let people at least
yeah,
speak a little more clearly or at least be
yeah,
more patient with me,
yeah.
mm.
I guess that's the same reason why I like being underestimated because like it's just like a lot of times when I work with clients, um, we put like so much thought into this design
Mm.
that the client hasn't even thought of, their team hasn't thought of, even their customers haven't even thought of it. Like we like literally think 100 steps ahead, like
Mm-hmm.
every down to every little detail. And when we deliver it, like every other designers underestimate it. They're like, oh yeah, that looks good. Okay. They
Mm-hmm.
don't
Mm-hmm.
understand how much thought and hours have gone into that, right? And our clients like, oh, that's good. Okay, good, great,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the reason why I love that is because usually like about a year later,
Yeah.
the client comes back to us
Mm-hmm.
and to make a change or something like that,
Yeah.
and now they cannot go anywhere else because a year later or 2 years later they'll come back and be like, son, I didn't realize it at the time,
Yeah.
but like so many of our customers come and tell me about like you've thought of everything that I haven't even thought of, and that's why they can't go anywhere now.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
love hearing that, and that wouldn't have happened if they didn't underestimate me, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You spoiled them before they
Yeah.
even knew it. You kind of spoiled them, but they couldn't appreciate it because they didn't know what they don't know. And
Yeah, exactly. In the
that's true.
beginning, I try to like prove it to them. I'm like, "Oh, you
Yeah.
you don't get it," like, and then
Mm-hmm.
I stopped because I'm like,
Yeah.
they're
Just
never gonna
stop.
get it until they
Uh-huh.
experience it. Like,
Yeah, you have to come to that on your own, and that
yeah,
made me think of. I just noticed the time. We're like really like wow, we've been talking for a while, but I wanted to connect that back again to storytelling. The idea of like the simplicity, like every time you revise, right? Whatever it is, a web page, whatever it is, content, right? Even your own stories in your own head, it's not the writing, it's the revision that's the work. And to simplify it and to get to like that nugget that is just right. And maybe if you're saying it out loud, maybe it's the rhythm. And that word doesn't work because it's too long and it doesn't sound well. And I feel like that's the same thing you're doing visually is
yeah.
what we're trying to do, like with our storytelling. At
It's
least that's
harder
what I'm
to
trying
make
to.
it simple.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just like the writing, right? It's harder
Yeah.
to make it shorter. It's harder to make it simpler. So when you do something simple, people look at it and they're like, "Oh, that's probably easy to do." Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you try it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah, less is more, but only if the
yeah.
less is actually more. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Obviously, you can make it simple and it'll still suck,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I
you
think
know.
there's a difference between simple and easy. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Yeah,
Simple, yet
because
it has all the essence, right? It
uh
has
huh,
all the information,
uh huh.
but you just simplified it.
You've
Like,
distilled it to its
yeah.
essence. Uh huh,
But if
uh
you
huh.
actually made it simple and you lost some some of that, that means you didn't.
Yeah, then you
It's
didn't
not really
simplify it. You
the
just
right
like
one.
chopped it up in a
Yeah,
way. Yeah, yeah. Easy is easy, but simple is hard. To me, that's the difference between something being difficult versus complex. Like, and
yeah,
that's one of the reasons I appreciate the group is that it's not it's not complex, but it is difficult. It's
yeah,
difficult to show up. It's difficult to like talk about uncomfortable things. It's not complex to do the work, but sometimes it's difficult to put aside the
yeah,
time. You see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
revise, revise, revise. Same with language, right? So like speaking in a plain way, speaking out loud in a plain and clear way, it doesn't mean it's easy, but it's not necessarily complex. You can break it down, is what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, too.
That's why I think the like the greatest quotes are like short and simple, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's
Mm-hmm.
like so deep.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Do you have a favorite quote?
No. I mean, I have so many, right? Like
Ah.
it's just like what did I just use today? Um, Today I think I did uh that Epictetus quote that says like it's impossible for a man to learn something that he already thinks he knows or something like that.
Ooh, oh, nice. And then sometimes when you get it wrong, you're like, wait, 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 this is how it goes. Because it only
Yeah,
works because it's been simplified. It only works in that way, right? Because if you
yeah, yeah.
change
So
one
once you start
thing,
adding, like once you try
yep.
to reiterate it, like you just
Hmm.
butcher it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like the design thing. You're like, oh, it's simple, it's nice. But what if you do this and no, don't change it. Don't add that little thing. Sometimes you have to like, kill it and then remake
Yeah,
it sometimes as well.
yeah.
I wanted to go back to one more thing because you mentioned it and I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about it if you're willing. And then we'll tell people how to like join Night Owls and stuff too. But would you be willing to talk a little bit more about your spiritual journey?
I don't really have I didn't. I don't think I really had a spiritual journey, but I grew up Christian
Mm-hmm.
all my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like my mom is like she's like the choir director. My dad's an elder and all of that.
Mm.
But when you grow up Christian, you're actually not really spiritual. It's
Mm.
just like my mom's making me go to the church, right? So as soon as I turned 18, I stopped going to church,
Mm.
and I consider myself an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't say I'm an atheist
Yeah.
because usually when people call themselves atheists, I feel like atheism is also a religion.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess like I started once I like met Gabby, and then I
Mm-hmm.
started doing yoga and all
Yeah.
of those things.
Yeah.
I did start like learning about more of those
Mm.
spiritual
Mm-hmm.
concepts. But the way I think of it is like to me, like religion, spirituality, those things are just the things that science cannot explain.
Mm. Yep.
Like
Yep.
I'm very like science
Mm-hmm.
focused person.
I would say those things are things that science can't explain. Dot dot dot. Yet, right? Like
Yeah,
we
yeah,
used
yeah,
to we used to
exactly.
think so many things were magic,
Yeah,
and now we can we have all this science, and so I think I agree with you, but I would add that to it. You see what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah.
Uh huh.
I mean, everything that we know through science at some point we didn't know. So
Right. Yeah.
obviously, like at
Exactly.
some point we're gonna learn all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's kind of and I think those are like just wisdoms that are carried from like somehow like
Hmm.
people 1,000 years ago, certain things that still applies today,
Mm-hmm.
which science still can't explain today, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's some wisdom to that, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I think of it. Like I don't dismiss spirituality.
Yeah.
Like for example, um, when people start talking about energy and things like that, I get really annoyed because like to me, when you say energy, like I'm thinking calorie or
Right.
watt voltage or what, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Like
Uh-huh.
so I
Uh-huh.
get really annoyed. But
Yeah.
like for example, when they say like when you're in a room and then like and people like a lot of them use the word vibration,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that there's like we're in the same vibration or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I also heard of this scientific study where they measure the brain waves of everybody like in a comedy club.
Mm-hmm.
And when the comedian made a joke and everybody kind of laughed at the same time, like they noticed that all of their brain waves like matched exactly at that
Oh.
moment.
Wow.
So
Wow.
obviously there's something happening there
Mm-hmm.
where there's like,
Mm-hmm.
they're in sync or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you want to call that like it's your energy that's
Mm-hmm.
in the room or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
people might say that like when you go into a room, it's like, oh, I feel this energy here, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so yeah, it's not the same energy that I'm thinking, like,
Yeah. We don't have the
typically,
words to
but I
describe. We use this word energy because there's a hole in how we can't even describe it sometimes. So we
yeah,
don't
there's
even
no
have a
word for it.
word. Yeah, exactly, exactly. So
Yeah,
maybe it's our knowledge is missing, but also we can't describe it,
yeah,
So how can we think about it or talk about it more with these
yeah,
words that are lacking, Yeah.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
feel like
yeah,
it's going to still be a mystery until we find better ways to talk about these things,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think what the problem is, like, in every industry, just like marketing, you know, there's always bad actors, right? There's always people that are like, you know, taking that and like using it so loosely
Mm-hmm.
that stops making sense, right?
Yeah,
Things
yeah.
like that, and I think that's like what I don't like. That when
Mm-hmm.
people use this spirituality
Mm-hmm.
to like, like scam people or like brainwash
Mm.
people into a cult or something like that.
Mm-hmm. To cover all the other sins.
There's a lot of marketing cults.
Yes, exactly. When I was in university, my undergraduate degree is in anthropology, biological anthropology. And there was this joke in anthropology of like how do you define a religion, right? How do you define a religion? Well, cult plus time equals religion. So I feel like give,
That's so true.
give it enough
So
time and yeah,
Scientology is gonna be like a legit religion one day.
right? Yeah. According to them, it already is for sure. But yeah, you just like you start with these wacky ideas and you get a few followers, like
Yeah,
marketing or whatever
yeah,
industry you want to say, and then they start making up their own like rules and sins
yeah,
and what you're supposed to do to be good versus evil. It creates this whole like world where you kind of got like religion and marketing. I'm sure religion and
yeah,
business. You get your own language, right?
yeah.
You get your own commandments pretty much in all these places.
That's actually one thing that I'm very aware of, and that I'm trying to make sure that at Night Owl,
Mm,
I want to make sure that everybody has different opinions, that
mm,
difference. Like, I want to make sure that we have all different opinions within
mm,
Night Owl. Not,
mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Because I think it starts to get dangerous when everybody thinks the same.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know?
Then you have a cult, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh. And nobody can get out. Yeah. And that's a problem. Oh God, yeah. Actually, there's this great book. You would probably like it. It's called Cultish. I don't know if you know it. It's called Cultish, and it's by
Yeah,
this woman named Amanda Montell, and she really talks about the language that cults use to kind of keep people feeling like they're trapped. It's super
mhm.
interesting. Yeah, you'll really have to read it. It's really, really good. But oh, not speaking of cults, completely unrelated to cults, tell us more about night owls and how people can join.
Yeah.
Not a cult.
It's on my website,
Mm-hmm.
sunyi.co, sunyi.co.
Isn't it sun.e?
Oh, that's my Instagram. So my
Oh, okay.
Instagram is sun.e, so sun.yi.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, like, if you go to Instagram, all the information you can find in there.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's $5 a month.
Mm-hmm. I
It's
mean,
not a huge.
it's not the money. It's that it's accountability, and
Yeah.
I end up feeling guilty when I join groups that are like, $100 a month, and I never show up, right?
I
Money, in
always say
fact.
that when
Mm-hmm.
you buy a book, it's not the $20 that you're paying is what's costing you. It's the 40 hours that you're gonna spend reading that book is that's the real price that you're paying, right?
Yeah. So okay, spin that around. What's the real price that people are paying when they join Night Owls, in your opinion?
I think it's exactly what you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like showing up in the small group, because
Mm.
we are so low price. I think that is one of the reasons why everybody's so like supportive, and like everybody's volunteering to lead small groups. Everybody, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean that's like something. It was unexpected for me. I was like, wow, like
Mm-hmm.
everybody's so like helpful, and I was like, wow, it's amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And what's your favorite thing? What do you love about the groups?
about the small groups,
Yeah, but
or
well, about Night Owls in general. Like, what do you
yeah,
love
I think
about it?
that's exactly it. Like the other day, I was talking about how I was in Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the people that I met, like, they can't afford to pay like $1,000 course. Like that to them is like 3 months salary, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I told them, like, even $5 is, is like a significant investment for them, right? To them,
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
$150 a month or two hundred
Yeah.
dollars a month,
Yeah.
like.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And when I said that, somebody DM me, and it's like, oh, like that was like so heartbreaking. Like, let me know if there's any way I can like sponsor these people or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And then I posted that, and then people started DMing me and saying, "Oh, I'm a designer. I would love to volunteer my time for like." I'm
Mhm.
like, that doesn't usually happen. Like when you sign up for most like marketing communities or marketing courses, that does not happen.
Mm.
Everybody's like me, right?
Mhm,
So I
mhm.
think that selfless part of the community is what I love the most.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You start with a place of giving rather than receiving,
yeah,
but then you end up receiving,
exactly.
so much
Yeah,
more. Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
So I don't feel like when I'm in night out, I don't feel like people are trying to take advantage of each other or anything like that. I just feel like
Yeah.
people are genuinely there to like really be supportive and yeah,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, that's what I love about it too. And that's my groups are kind of similar in that they're really
mhm,
low priced so that they're accessible for people who probably need my services the
yeah.
most. And it's all about the community and the communal learning.
It's what I enjoy doing, I guess.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
I'm not really
Mhm.
thinking about the numbers or the growth or anything like that right now. So I mean, I'm
Mhm.
sure at some point I will,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
right now I'm not.
It's about the
Yeah,
service, right? It's the service that
yeah,
that
yeah,
you're creating a place for these people to meet, and I think that's the most
yeah,
beautiful thing. Yeah, because like yeah, I think you attract the kind of people that you kind of I don't want to say deserve. It's like maybe that's a bit odd, but I feel like what you put out is what you get back and you're putting out a lot, so you're getting back, I think exactly
mhm.
what you need.
I
Yeah.
actually think you're right. Everybody attracts people that are like them,
Mhm.
whether you know it or not.
Yeah, whether it's
You're
conscious or
automatically
not.
gonna end up
Uh-huh.
attracting people that are like you, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
so
Yeah.
if you're an asshole, you're gonna attract assholes. You know what I mean? Like, if
Exactly.
you're kind, you're gonna attract kind people, and if you're
Mhm.
selfless, you're gonna attract selfless people. I think that's
Yeah,
how it
yeah.
goes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think part of it is that you did this thing and you are who you are, and that's part of the reason that everybody has like your light has kind of shined
Yeah.
or shone on
I
everybody.
think that's why it's so important for you to show up truly as who you are
Mm.
instead of trying to be somebody else, and
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
a lot of mistakes that a lot of people make.
Yeah.
They try to be Gary Vee.
We've been told that that's what we should be and that's what we should want and that's how power looks like and like
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of undoing. Like when you said I think you mentioned going back to Korea or coming to the US or you had to undo all that learning, right? And that's a lot to ask people to do is
Exactly.
like say,
Yeah.
"You know what? No, actually everybody else is wrong." That's asking a lot, from the
Yep.
beginning. Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully we'll attract more members. And yeah, for me, I love talking about like language and you're a good person I think to talk to because you really reflect on what those things mean and how they integrate too with being who you are because
Mhm.
like you said, who we are in different languages is different. And that's great because a lot of people say, "Oh, when I speak this other language, I don't feel like myself." But it's also like dot 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 yet. Like you have to find yourself,
Oh, that's true, yeah. Once I moved here, I guess that was the starting point of me creating this new persona, right? Like
Mhm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, and luckily in Korea, like it's a culture where you're already expected to be different people for different people, right? You're
Yeah, yeah,
expected to
yeah.
change. But in some cultures, no, you're supposed to always be this person for everybody you
Mm.
meet. Depending on where you're coming from, that can be more
Yeah, it's gonna
challenging
be
too.
different, yeah.
Yeah. I think we could have like more conversations and talk about more stuff.
Yeah,
But for
we'll do it
now,
again.
we'll leave it. Yes, we'll do it again. We'll talk about lots of fun stuff. But thank you so much for coming today. And I'm really happy that you could share your wisdom with everybody else.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so
Yay!
much.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yeah, bye everyone. Thanks again. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Cheers.